On May 21st, 2013, Think Global School received the honor of speaking with Dr. Oliver Rothschild. Dr. Rothschild is a social entrepreneur focused on creating innovative solutions to challenges in global health and education. He currently works as a co-founder of Kepler, an initiative to reinvent college in the developing world. Prior to Kepler, Dr. Rothschild worked in Rwanda as Deputy Director of Partners in Health under Dr. Paul Farmer.
Thanks for the introduction. Thank you guys for having me. I trained as a medical doctor, worked in healthcare for a while, but now am sort of bouncing between a few projects, working on what a lot of people call social entrepreneurship. Have you guys heard that phrase before? Does anyone know what it means? Try to give me a definition. There's not a real definition, so there's no wrong answer.
Can you make a change in society?
Yeah, so making a change, that's sort of the social part. Yeah, taking on social change. What's the entrepreneurship part?
Doing it yourself.
Doing a what?
Yourself.
Yeah, so doing it yourself, creating something new, that's a piece. Anything else?
New ideas.
New ideas, definitely new ideas.
The business aspect of it?
Yeah, that's what I was waiting for. So I think those are the three pieces that stand out to me. There's you're taking on big social problems, so healthcare, education, clean energy, the things you read about, things that sort of nonprofits work on. You're doing it in sort of a different way. So entrepreneurship, when you think about Facebook or Google, it's folks taking on sort of big new ideas. But then you're not doing it as a charity. You're sort of using the market. You're using sort of private industry and sort of business approaches to these problems. So sort of why would you put these things together? Why not just do a business and make a lot of money and then give it away to charity? So I think I've thought about this stuff as I try to figure out what I want to do with my life and my career, and maybe you guys will think about this stuff. There's a part of me that is interested in sort of the business side of things. I've got sort of friends in internet startups. You look at Tumblr got bought last week for $1 billion. The problem with sort of working in business to make money is that most of the things you can do to make money, you've got to sell things. You've got to sort of solve problems that rich people have. So there was this famous bank robber in the 18th century who got arrested for robbing a bank, and the police officer asked him, why do you rob banks? And he said, that's where the money is. So that's the challenge, right? If you want to do sort of business and make money, you're constantly going to be trying to solve problems that rich people have. So the first time I came back from Rwanda, there was a new startup that opened a store next door to my building, and they were selling in the window when I got back a dog Santa Claus outfit. So they're a really fancy dog clothing store. And this dog Santa Claus outfit had diamonds on the collar and it was about $1,000. And they did really well. They expanded. Now they've got 4 stores in New York. They're kicking butt. But they're trying to solve problems that rich people have. They're trying to solve problems that aren't delivering medication to people in Rwanda, that aren't trying to fix education in inner city communities. They're not solving problems that I'm passionate about. How do you get the best diamond-studded Santa Claus outfit for your dog? So there are reasons why you think about sort of so that's why the sort of entrepreneurship part by itself doesn't totally do it for me. The social piece is a little bit harder because, so if you care about healthcare and education, you care about solving big problems, why not just start a charity? And to me, there are a few reasons. It's harder to make a charity grow big. It's harder to raise significant money for a charity. But the real challenge with sort of charity to me is the lack of all the great things about markets that sort of make things work well, that give the sort of players in markets really direct and clear feedback about what they're doing. A few years ago, I was working in Rwanda with Partners in Health, and one of the things we were doing was trying to figure out how to make sure pharmacies around the country never ran out of drugs, never ran out of medication. So we'd like get in the car in the capital city of Rwanda, Kigali, and drive like 5 hours up through the hills, like where there's barely electricity, where no one's got computers. And you get there and you go into the hospital and like the pharmacy shelves are empty. And we talked to these, I remember like talking to these pharmacists about like what's going on. You need these medicines to save lives. You have enough money in your bank account. Why aren't you missing medications here? And there are tons, the guy gives you tons of reasons why he can't keep his medication stock. He can't communicate with the central pharmacy. He doesn't have a computer to keep track of his stock. He doesn't have enough staff members to sort of track things. And I remember one visit to one of these pharmacies. We finished, at the hospital in the morning. We were going out for lunch in the neighborhood. And we go to this little restaurant, this little like kiosk, roadside stand. And we'd just gotten out of this hospital where like literally life-saving medications from kids are out of stock. They don't have enough antibiotics for kids. And we get to this little kiosk and his shelves are like full of potato chips, of Coca-Cola. His refrigerator is working perfectly and it's stocked full of like every drink you can imagine. And I remember like stopping and thinking like we have a huge team and millions of dollars focused on trying to keep drugs in this pharmacy and we can't do it. And this like roadside guy by himself keeps his shelves like perfectly stocked, keeps his Coca-Cola cold and like never runs out. So we talked to him about like what does he do? How does he make sure that he keeps his shelves stocked? And he, the story he tells I think is why, I think for me is sort of why this crossover between charity and business is exciting. So the story he tells is he says, when I came here, there were like 3 other stores just like this. And we all tried to keep our medication in stock. We all tried to keep our Coca-Cola in stock. One guy sort of ran out and his wife got sick and he couldn't make the trip to the distributor to get new stuff, so he went out of business. Another guy was just sort of lazy, and sort of didn't run his business well, didn't keep track of income, so he went out of business. And pretty soon this guy who was willing to do really whatever it took. So on like a national holiday, he'd drive 6 hours to a neighboring country to get Coca-Cola to make sure his shelves stayed in stock. The people who succeed and stick around are the people who actually serve their customers well. Whereas this pharmacy, no matter what they do, they get funded. No matter if all their patients hate going there, no matter if they run out of medications, they're sort of a government and a charity-funded hospital. Without that market mechanism, it's tough to make them succeed. So that's the combination that sort of led me to social entrepreneurship, to sort of taking on these problems with this combination of business and sort of social motivation. A little bit about sort of the kind of stuff I've worked on. I did a lot of healthcare work. I worked with Bill Clinton's foundation, helping hospitals in sub-Saharan Africa sort of run better, work more efficiently. I worked with Paul Farmer as a doctor, actually providing medical care. Over the last couple years, I've switched gears a little bit to education. And the way I want to do sort of the rest of this conversation is, when you think about entrepreneurship, like there's there's running the business, there's sort of coming up with the idea. A big part of what you have to do early on, and as you guys think of new ideas and you guys think of things to start, like a big part of what you have to do early on is get people on board. So you have to convince people to join your team, and probably most importantly, you've got to convince investors to fund you. So that's sort of what this month has been about, this last couple of months have been about for me. For sort of social entrepreneurship, it's easier and it's harder to raise money from investors. Like it's easier because you can get money from, Bill Gates' foundation as a nonprofit. And then you can also turn around and get investments from traditional, do you guys know what venture capitalists do? Does that sound familiar? So when you're raising money for a social entrepreneurship organization, you can sort of go to both sides. The challenge is that you don't really fit in either category. So Bill Gates' foundation is looking for things that really change the world, looking for things that help really poor people. Has anyone seen The Social Network, the movie? So like Justin Timberlake in that movie, is sort of a venture capitalist. He's working with startups, he's working with Facebook, giving them some money, giving them some advice, and helping them take off. When you go to Justin Timberlake, he doesn't care how many poor kids in Africa you're helping. He cares about, like that quote, like, what's cool, $1 billion. So when you're raising money and when you're thinking about how to tell your story, you have to sort of hit both of those pieces. So I thought, one way to sort of give you guys a little insight into what this is like, sort of what this career looks like and what kinds of things you think about, is I want to give you guys the pitch that we've been giving to folks who were trying to get to invest in us. And I want to split the room in half. So I'm going to say, what's your name?
Cash.
Cash. So, perfect. Good place to split when we're talking about investors. So Cash will be on the Justin Timberlake side, because his name is Cash. So what I want you guys to think about, so I'm going to tell you about the new venture we're launching. And what I want you guys to be thinking about while I'm telling you this is really the sort of for-profit investor perspective. So you guys think like, you remember Justin Timberlake in that movie? Like, think like that. Think like, I think the sort of biggest thing that you guys are looking for when you hear a new idea, when a venture capitalist hears a new idea, they call it a hockey stick. So you guys are looking for a hockey stick. So what a hockey stick is like the growth of the thing you're investing in. So like, if you can picture a hockey stick, it sort of starts off slow, and then you get to the handle, and it sort of takes off. There's that quote from The Social Network where he's like, what's cool, $1 billion? It's kind of funny, but it's actually really the way that sort of world works. So if you think about, someone like, Justin Timberlake's character in that movie, like finding a bunch of startups, he's probably going to find 30 Facebooks, right? And 29 of them are going to crash and burn. And he's going to give them each $1 million. So he's going to be down $29 million before he even sort of gets started. So he's got to have, so each and every one of those guys has to have the chance of being incredibly big and incredibly successful. Okay, so that's what you guys are listening to when I give you my pitch. And I want you guys to ask me some tough questions because we're still doing it. I won't tell you how far we've gotten until after. So on this side of the room, I want you guys to be Bill Gates. So Bill Gates is sort of coming at this with a different perspective. He doesn't really care about if anyone's making money in this. He doesn't care about the actual investment side. What Bill Gates cares about when he looks at a new idea, he cares, does this have the potential to really change the world, right? Because the Gates Foundation is big, right? Bill Gates has what, like a few $1 billion. But compared to the size of the world, 6 billion people, or 3 billion, or 2 or 3 billion people living in some kind of poverty, that's not very much money. So he's got to really carefully choose his ideas and pick things that are going to be, have a chance to really change the world. So what you guys are looking for is like real impact. And I think what both sides look for, and I think maybe the core most important thing about what makes any new project successful is the team and the idea behind it. So before I give you the pitch and see what you guys think, see if you guys are going to invest, the last story I just want to tell is about the first sort of social entrepreneur that we invested in. So when I was at Partners in Health in Rwanda, we had a little fund to invest in sort of employees' big ideas. And there was one community health worker who had an idea and was applying for money to launch it. So we were interviewing all the people who were sort of applying for these ideas, and we called him in and we looked up his sort of performance and how he'd been doing at the hospital as a community health worker. And it turned out he'd been walking 10 miles every day. So he woke up at about 6 a.m. and walked 10 or 15 miles to deliver medications to all the patients in his area. And most of the community health workers walk 2 or 3 miles. So we were like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. He's spending 12 hours a day walking, and he's getting really good results with his patients. So we called him in and we sort of were talking to him about this little business he wanted to start. But to sort of get a sense of him, we asked him about his daily routine and what were his challenges. And we all thought he was going to say, what do you think my challenges are? I have to walk 15 miles every day, and it's super hot, and it's up these hills. But his response was, no, I don't really have any challenges. I love my job. It's great. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be delivering medication and taking care of these people. So that wasn't, we weren't totally satisfied. We're like, you sure there are no problems, there are no issues you have going on to sort of make this job work? And he says, actually my back hurts sometimes. So we're like, if you're walking 15 miles a day up hills, of course your back hurts. But we wanted to draw him out and sort of learn a little more about how he dealt with his work. So we said, why does your back hurt? And he says, because of all the rocks I have to carry. So we're like, you're walking 15 miles a day delivering medications, and you're deciding to fill your bag full of rocks too? So we're all really puzzled, wondering what's going on. So we ask him, wait, you're carrying rocks? You're walking 15 miles a day and you're carrying rocks around? He said, yeah, I have to carry rocks. And the only place to get the right size rocks is near my house. So I have to pick them up in the morning, and then I have to take them around with me all day. So we say, wait, why are you carrying? Why do you need the rocks to carry all day? And he said, I've tried a bunch of things, but it's really the only way to keep the packs of wild hyenas away while I'm delivering these medicines. And we didn't even need to hear his investment idea after that. We're like, we are giving you whatever you want. You're the kind of person who's going to make something successful. So I want you guys, both sides, when you guys are listening to sort of this pitch, to be thinking about that guy and thinking about what it takes to sort of create something new and hike over many miles. And is this idea, this sort of team that I'm going to tell you about, are they going to be able to stand up to the packs of hyenas that any new company starting off is gonna face? So maybe I'll switch to the presentation, and I'm going to go out of teaching to you guys mode and go into selling to you guys mode. So as I'm talking, maybe just come up with in your head a question or two, and make them tough questions. You guys, this is your money you're going to be giving up to invest in this big idea. So think up a couple of questions as I go. And when I'm done, I hope everyone has at least one question. Maybe we won't get time for everybody, but hope everyone has at least one question that you'd ask if you were, really examining this idea as something you wanted to be involved with. Is there a clicker, or do I just have to stand up here?
It's not lights off. You might have to press it.
Okay, yeah, sure. Okay. Am I too dark for the video though?
Now you are a ghost.
Boop. Okay, so thank you guys for having me. I want to tell you a little bit about a new project we're working on in higher education in the developing world. Higher education in Africa is broken right now. And we're launching Kepler as a new venture to really take on that problem in a meaningful way. Our team's been running a nonprofit organization in Rwanda for about 10 years. We provide university scholarships to students, and we do wraparound teaching, career services, and education to make sure students get through the 4 years of university and get jobs. And for the 250 students we've been able to reach, we've been really successful. But that 250 students is really a drop in the bucket compared to the size of the problem with universities in Africa right now. So out of 200 million young people in Africa, only 2% of those are going to actually make it through college and get jobs afterwards. But the problem isn't just on the student side. The problem's on the employer side too. So companies like Google, Microsoft, IBM, Procter & Gamble are trying to build businesses in these economies, but they're unable to because they can't find the skills they need. So in South Africa alone, there are 600,000 empty jobs where they're looking for people and just can't find people with the right skills. At the same time, so when companies do hire people, they find they have to retrain them from scratch. So in South Africa, again, about $400 million is spent every year by private companies, basically retraining from scratch people who graduate from university. And what we see from our students on the ground is that this problem comes because universities aren't set up the way we think they should be. So when you go into university in most of these countries, half the time your teacher's not going to show up. When your teacher does show up, what class looks like is reading aloud from an outdated textbook and giving you, a couple minutes to sort of copy down what you heard. And that's university. So not only is it really bad quality, but it's really expensive. So the people who are reading to you from textbooks are some of the best paid people in a lot of these countries. They're PhDs, maybe not in the right field, and maybe they're not good teachers, but they're pretty rare, highly educated folks. So running this model is really expensive. This is a picture of the grandmother of one of our students who saved up for years to help her granddaughter go to school, and then found that she had saved $300 towards a first year cost of $1,500. And it's not just a problem in Rwanda. This is a huge market across sub-Saharan Africa and the developing world, and it's growing really quickly. So, across the developing world, including China and India, this is about $250 billion spent per year. And if you just cut it down to sort of the 10 countries in sub-Saharan Africa that we think are in the most need of this kind of program, it's still $10 billion, growing at 10% a year. And we think we have the right team to execute on this vision. We don't have any community health workers who throw rocks at hyenas, but what we do have is about 20 years working in sub-Saharan Africa on the ground. The team's formed of a couple education experts. So Di Ellis ran the highest performing network of charter schools in the Northeast last year. My background's in healthcare, building and scaling a hospital network that served about 1 million patients on the ground in East Africa. And our third partner is right now the advisor to the CEO of the largest education philanthropy in the UK. So how are we going to take on these problems? The big idea is we want to be the Southwest Airlines of higher education. So we want to be really low cost, no frills, but high quality and reliable, and actually get people where they need to go to jobs. And to do that, we want to bring together sort of 3 big ideas. So one of them is pulling together the best online content. So this is, online classes from places like Harvard and Princeton. This is things like the Khan Academy and the best videos from sort of YouTube and TED Talks. So we want to pull together the best online content to replace these really well-paid guys sitting at the front of the room and reading from textbooks. We want to take some of that money and resources we're saving there and invest it in really high-quality, on-the-ground teachers. So the actual experience is going to feel more like a really good high school where your teacher's engaging you, not a big lecture hall filled with 200 people passively listening. And then the third thing we want to do is bring employers into this. So we want to get folks like IBM, like Google, like Microsoft as real partners in building our curriculum and in giving our students time to actually learn on the job during school. And maybe the best way to get a sense of what this looks like on the ground is sort of a day in the life of one of our students. So let's start the night before. So the night before, they're at home watching online lectures, getting their passive content for free, on their computers. And they come in the next morning, done with lecture and ready to actually solve problems. So you start off with a discussion section around a class on justice from Harvard. After that, you move on to a session with your internship manager who helps you plan and perform your work at your year-long internship. Then in the afternoon, maybe you do a software programming project where you're working by yourself, but you have support from tutors and TAs sort of on the side. And we also want to redefine what it means to be done with college. When do you graduate? Do you graduate when you've sat in a chair for 4 years? We think you graduate when you've shown that you actually have the skills to perform in sort of a real-world employment setting. And we think if you can keep costs low, higher education is actually a great industry to be in. You have students with you for 4 years paying tuition. It's a really high likelihood that they'll get jobs, so they're willing to pay a fair amount. So we think we can break even at an individual campus after 2 years, and we think we can break even as a business after 4 years. So we're raising about $1.8 million in this funding phase to get us through to the end of 2014. We've already made significant progress. So in Rwanda, we've launched a pilot to sort of prove that the teaching model works, that we can get bandwidth speeds, fast enough to actually do the online learning component. And we've opened applications and already gotten 3,000 applications in Rwanda for our first 50 spots. Over the next year and a half, if we can raise the money we need, we're going to both be launching a full university in Rwanda and preparing to launch a university in Kenya. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and maybe switch back away from sales pitch mode back into a discussion. So let's maybe start with Bill Gates, all the Bill Gateses. So coming out of that sort of conversation, and that's like a typical sort of presentation that we give to an investor. It's basically what we gave to an investor last week. What are your thoughts? How does this sound? Is this going to have the impact that Bill Gates wants to see with his lots of money, but sort of not enough to take on all the problems in the world?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
How many people would be involved in it? So you said you had 3,000 applicants, and then 50 would be something with that. Would that be given?
So 50 is sort of the pilot year to get started. We hope we can ramp up to a sort of each campus will hopefully have about 500 students per year. And our financial projections are based on us getting to 500 students per year in about 4 years. So it looks like 50, maybe next year we take 100 new students, maybe the year after that we take 200, and maybe the fourth year, that's when we get the sort of up to 500.
Yeah, the question was going to be,
Yeah.
was 50 going to be that another jump?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but I mean, I think it's a good broader point. The big change isn't going to come because we run every university in the world. The big changes will come because we think of some ideas that other people copy and learn from. And I think that's exactly the question that the Gates Foundation or other foundations ask. Like, even if this organization can't do it all themselves, can they create some ideas that other people copy?
I was wondering, how are you actually going to get this program out to the kids in more remote locations that could actually really benefit from this sort of focused learning?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So right now, people in more remote locations, for the most part, a very low percentage makes it to secondary school. So early on, I don't think we're going to be able to reach the absolute sort of poorest, most remote folks. I think there are elements of our ideas that could be copied by primary schools so that these remote locations can get their primary schools strong enough to get people into secondary schools. Then when those secondary schools are strong enough, they'll be ready to send students to university. But it's a good question. I don't think we'll be able to get to the poorest, most remote folks in the next few years at least.
What would the benefits of starting up in Rwanda be?
So the way we're thinking about sort of geography is and first of all, that's a great question because if you think about sort of impact, you might want to start from a bigger country, right? So why are you asking that?
I'm just wondering because there are many more countries in Africa that might be easier to start in.
Yeah.
Like, I see that you have South Africa.
Yeah.
Maybe that would be easier because they kind of have more schools started and set up already.
Yeah, and a bigger population. No, I think that's a great question. So the way we're thinking about that is we want to be a big fish in a small pond for our first few years. So we're going to be building our brand. We're going to be working out all the kinks in the model. So we want to start with a small country in a pretty small market. We also have about 10 years of experience working there. We've been running the scholarship program there. But we want to expand pretty quickly to Kenya, South Africa, and beyond. Maybe I'll pause Bill Gates just for 1 second. We can come back and do more. But Justin Timberlake, what do you guys think? What's your sort of high-level reaction?
Quick question.
Yeah?
Are we big investors, or is invest gonna affect us a lot if we lose?
So if it's it's a good question. So if it's about $1.8 million total, well, typically you raise that from 5 or 10 different folks. So it's probably you're thinking about $250,000, which is pretty small for most investors. But so think about it as pretty small. But at the same time, obviously you don't want to throw away $250,000. Cash, I think you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I wanted to ask why, I'm looking at this graph here, it doesn't seem like
you plan to do any marketing research in Kenya? Have you already, or is that one of your plans to do in there? Or if not, why is it not? Do you think you just start in Kenya and make it work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think it's a bigger point about how you launch a new sort of social venture. How do you tell people about it? How do you get people sort of interested and engaged? Because if you're really running it like a business, you're probably going to need to advertise like a business. So how we launch a marketing campaign is really important. Sort of specifically to answer your question, we're launching right now. While it's not on the chart, sort of the phase one of this marketing campaign is we're running a market survey right now. So we're trying to figure out what does everyone want in terms of university. We're sending out a pretty broad survey to a couple thousand current university students. How do they choose their current university? Why do they choose it? How much are they paying? Would they be interested in something else? Where is it not meeting their needs? But figuring out what your customers want is super important. That's what the little kiosk owner did that the pharmacist didn't do in the sort of first story. Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, so the money that you get from the university students, that would be coming back to the investors, or how does it work?
How do investors make money? That's a good question. That's a more complicated question. But so typically, on this side of the room, you guys don't care about money, right? You're in it for love. But for you guys, the way investors make money in like the way Justin Timberlake made money from Facebook is you don't actually get any of the money that's coming into the business, but you own a percentage of the business. So if that business is ever sold, that's when you get your payoff. And businesses are sold, like, I don't know if you guys saw this in the news, but Yahoo just bought Tumblr, or Facebook bought Instagram. Those are some like famous ones that happened recently. So a company can buy another company. The other thing that can happen is an IPO. You ever heard that word? So an IPO is where a company like goes public. Have you heard that phrase? So instead of selling a company to another company, you're selling a company to public investors. You're saying, I'm putting this up for sale, and everyone in the world can buy a little stock. And that's what a stock in a company is. It's you owning a little tiny piece, you buying a little tiny piece of the company. But it's a really good question for us, actually, and this is a question a lot of investors ask. So how are we ever? And they call it an exit. How do you get your money out? Like after we put your money into a company like this, how do you ever get it out? Like who's going to want to buy? Or you're never going to have a public stock of a Rwandan company, right? So the way we're thinking about our exit, if we're ever going to give our investors back our money, there are a lot of people who are looking at African higher education and making big investments. So last month, this big, huge company called Laureate just committed $150 million to go buy a bunch of universities in Africa. So there are a lot of ways we've been thinking about sort of getting you guys your money back. But it's a great question. Yeah.
Oh.
In black.
I know you're trying to sell us a pitch, but in which ways can this project fail or not reach its goals?
It's a great question. So I think there are two big risks that we're worried about. I think one is regulation. So the reason a degree from college is valuable is because the government says this is a good college and it's got accreditation, right, to offer a degree. So in all of these countries, we've got a little bit of a legal and political process to go through to get accredited, to prove to them that we're really a good university. So that's one worry we have. We have an advisory board of local politicians and folks on the ground in Rwanda and Kenya to help us through that. The other challenge, I think Cash hit on it, is marketing. So, like, I don't know what universities you guys want to go to, probably in your head, but you probably don't want to. You probably didn't think of Kepler on your college list. Those of you guys who are graduating, because you never heard of it, right? So there's a big branding, a big marketing. Here in Boston, like Harvard and MIT are like the world experts on advertising. Like they are so good at building their brand. So we hope we'll be able to launch that, and that's another reason to launch to the question over here. That's another reason to launch in a small country first. Prove that you're really good, get some press out about you, and then when you launch in other countries, people have already heard about you. So that's our thinking on those two risks, but it's a great question. What else?
The first 50 or anyone that attend this school, will they have to be able to pay or cover all the costs, or will there be some kind of financial aid given to them? And if there is, how do you intend on covering those costs in the future that you pay for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So and I think it's a bigger question, like anytime you're doing something that you're going to try to get poor people or relatively poor people to pay for, you're always worried about, what's their actual ability to pay, right? And this is where these two sides of the room like really come into conflict, is that question. So when you're doing social entrepreneurship, we have a choice. Like to your point, do we make it a lot cheaper and sort of easier to get into and reach the people who really need it? Or do we sort of push harder and try to charge more and extract more profits and get to be a bigger business? So there's no easy answer to that question. The very specific answer for this case is the way we're going to make money is actually sort of interesting. I didn't go into it in detail here because we're still sort of working on it and confirming with employers. But the way we want to both make money and make it cheap enough for a lot of people to access is we want your senior year of college to be mostly on the job. So you're going to be, like, during the daytime, you're going to be actually working for one of these companies, and you're going to take nights and weekend classes. So like a typical night school college, but that's what your fourth year is going to look like. And that salary you make during your fourth year is going to go and we don't know if it's going to be loans that you sort of promise up front, but basically that salary in your fourth year is going to go to subsidize the cost of your previous 3 years. But that's the idea in terms of revenue model. How much time do we have left? I realize there's no clock. 4:26. Okay, so maybe 5 more minutes, enough time for a couple more questions. But just, anyone, maybe both sides of the room. Yeah?
I was just wondering, your earlier point about people graduating when you feel they're ready, how do you measure that?
That's a great question. So there are a couple schools that have just started doing this in the US. It's like a brand new thing. It's called competency-based education. So the idea of competency-based education is sit down up front and decide not what number of hours you want people to spend in school. It's not about inputs. It's not about how many hours you spend sitting in a chair. It's not about how many credits you earn. It's about what skills do you have coming out of university. So these few universities in the US have started to put together tests. And they don't really look like multiple choice sort of like answer tests. They look like we need a video of you presenting a complicated idea to an audience and communicating it clearly. We need a research paper that's more than 40 pages long that breaks down a really complicated argument and sort of gets into the pros and the cons of sort of different points of view. So there's sort of this list of competencies or skills that you have to prove that you have. And then you sort of build the classes to get you to those competencies instead of sort of the other way around, building the classes and hoping you get the skills out of it. So that's when we award degrees, we're going to award degrees based on tests like that, rather than based on how many credits someone's earned or how many hours they've spent in a classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the cultural aspect, like who are going to be the teachers and how to be a cultural scientist.
So that you should have been saying on that side of the class. But the way you can ask that question for this side of the room is, I'm worried it's going to be too expensive to fly in all your teachers from America. Like, how are you going to keep your costs down, right? Yeah. But it's the same question. That's a good question for both sides, what the staffing model is. So the way we're thinking about that, in the near term, we probably will spend too much on teachers. And that's why we don't actually break even for 4 years. Because I think what the first couple of years are going to be about is the teachers are going to be half teaching and they're going to be half building the school and figuring out what the curriculum is. What we're going to do, does that sound familiar? And I think every new educational institution sort of goes through that to some extent. But the other thing we're going to do is we're going to pair a local teacher with an international teacher. So we're going to have Rwandan teaching fellows working with really well-trained, sort of expert American teachers. And that'll continue for at least the first 3 or 4 years. What we're hoping we can get to is having a very small number of a mix of international and local master teachers working with a much broader group of sort of less well-trained like teaching assistants or teaching fellows. So that'll both keep costs low and for you guys, it'll make sure that the people actually delivering the content, especially in a politically charged place like Rwanda, are actually sensitive to the local culture and environment. Okay, one more question. Oh, sorry. 2 more questions.
What would the application project or process look like? And how would you choose students? Because I think that the previous education could have been very
Yeah.
Two applicants. So how would you see what people are suitable?
Yeah, and so it's about, how do we choose students, but it's also about what students do we want to pick, right? So, and it gets back to this conflict between who can actually afford it and who actually needs it, right? Because the students who are going to be the least well prepared are going to be the students who need a great education the most, right? And the students who probably have a lot of money, their parents are probably well educated, they probably don't need something really great. So it's a tough question, and I think it comes back to this idea that we're not going to be able to shoot for sort of the most poorly academically prepared students early on. So we're going to have to shoot for sort of the mid-range. The students who get the best grades are probably going to be going to the universities that already exist, that already have great brands, the Harvard of Rwanda, basically. And the students who are really poorly academically prepared, at least when we're beginners at this, we're probably not going to do a great job at both being able to afford, everything they need, and also just really delivering something great for them. So I think we're going to shoot for sort of the mid-range academically students. Sort of technically how it works is we have a public application process. We've got sort of local partners who help us find the right students and sort of spread our brand a little bit in the countries we work in. Okay, so last question over here.
I was just wondering why you personally chose to invest in higher education versus primary and secondary. It kind of builds off of what they've been asking, but
yeah.
Was that why? Because it seems like it's starting from the people who don't need it as much.
Yeah. So I think again, this is you guys are hitting on the real core question in like social entrepreneurship. How do you balance the entrepreneurship side with like making the biggest difference? And it may not even be primary, secondary education. It may be like prenatal vitamins that have the biggest impact on future brain development, or it might be like, grandparents you can sort of like from the sort of Bill Gates perspective, you always want to be asking what's going to have the biggest impact and what kind of investment has the biggest impact. So some of our drive for higher education comes from, this side of the room, comes from thinking about like what can make this a sustainable business. There are really incredible organizations doing social entrepreneurship, doing for-profit businesses at the primary and secondary level, but it's harder because the most expensive primary school in all of Africa is only, a few $100s a year versus the more expensive universities, which are like $10,000 a year. So you can see there's a lot more of a market there. The other piece is just sort of practical. We've been working in Rwanda in higher education for a long time, and there aren't as many people thinking about higher ed. So it's, again, the sort of big fish in a small pond. How can we sort of differentiate ourselves early and make a difference? So I think I'm going to call it there. Thank you guys so much for listening to this. And I hope like this way of thinking gives you a sense of, as you guys think of new ideas that you get excited about, and as you guys think of new things that you want to solve, big social problems or big businesses, I hope this gave you kind of a sense of like how people you're going to have to attract, how they think about it, and sort of what are the choices and what are the things you have to weigh and balance. But thank you guys for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Think Global School. For more information, visit thinkglobalschool.org.